This year's surprise success was The Sound of Freedom, a low-budget film based on the true story of Tim Ballard and his efforts against child trafficking. I was worried this film was all bark and no bite when I walked into a surprisingly full theater, and boy was I wrong. So, I'll start my list with some praise. First, the tone and pace of the movie needed to be on point for a film taking on such a dark subject. Call me cynical, but this was one of my chief doubts going into this. Maybe I have watched too many recent Marvel films where every serious moment is immediately counteracted with a quip or self-aware humor, but I was happily thrown into this movie that not only took the subject it was dealing with seriously, but it doubled down as soon as you thought that it would let up. If a movie delves into child trafficking, it can very easily become too dark and gratuitous. But they threaded the needle in showing the evil Tim was facing in his professional life and how it spilled over into his personal life, demanding action, without it becoming too much. Now, number two in my main fix has to do with how they handled Tim's personal life, specifically his relationship with his wife, Catherine. When I first watched The Sound of Freedom, I had no background on the true events, so I had to take things at face value until I could look them up myself. For the most part, they did a very good job, but I could tell in the theater every time a scene with Catherine would come up, it was likely a butchered version of a longer, more thorough storyline they couldn't fit into the movie. So much so, I wish they had almost removed it entirely. She came off as what was meant to be an important role but was sidelined into the supportive wife character. This was verified when I looked into the actual story and events where Catherine was the main driving force for Tim leaving his job to save these kids by any means possible. I wish that could have been included in the story, as it felt they landed somewhere in between Catherine being important and a non-existent character to the plot. Every scene they had together took me out of the story overall, and it was easily my biggest complaint. Lastly, there's always a risk in leaning heavily on child actors, but they blew me out of the water in The Sound of Freedom. Every scene with Crystal and Lucas held my attention, as the depiction of pain and inability to comprehend why was all too real. I found myself tearing up at the innocence of these children being taken from them for perverse gain, and I felt a fire of rage and frustration that if this were to happen in my world, I don't think I could compose myself as well as Tim and his crew had. And maybe that is exactly what the movie wanted you to think about. The fact that this does happen, yet so many happily ignore it as long as it doesn't directly affect them. Maybe we all need to be less apathetic and live our lives with purpose, much like Tim. It's never too late to start. Anyways, these are my thoughts. I loved the film, and I'd give it a solid B+ grade. I hope they can work out some of the kinks and the broad strokes of their storytelling, as stories like Tim's can make even more of an impact than it already has. Let me know your thoughts down below.